Hello again.
Do you think you can handle the intro?
Oh
this
no,
time?
I wasn't even. Welcome to Relatively Weird.
Welcome to Relatively Weird.
The podcast where two cousins talk about everything weird, right?
You did it.
Let's get into it.
Well, I'm Kim, if you care.
Oh, I'm Jilli. Well, I figure, what is this, like, episode? I don't even know.
Who knows?
They know
when
who we
it's gonna
are.
come in. I know.
All right, so this is an episode that we hopefully will put out on 4th of July week. So I decided to do, this is not Independence Day themed, even though I literally have it in my notes, Independence Day themed episode.
We really just harped
It
on.
is, no, wait, it is American history themed.
Okay.
So there's going to be two stories.
Okay.
Both of these have taken place after Independence Day.
We were independent already,
We
is what you're saying.
were independent, yes. Okay. I'm going to tell you about the death of George Washington.
Oh my.
I'm just laughing because this one is a little bit crazy. Okay.
Really?
Kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know? Like, what do you
think
know
so.
about his death?
Listen.
Like, after...
I'm going to embarrass the shit out of myself right now. Nothing.
Okay.
I don't know anything
Yeah,
about it.
I didn't know either. Except...
Take my citizenship. I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
Except, if anyone ever listens to The Dollop, they did an episode about George Washington's death. It is funny. Go listen to it. But I'm going to do my version. Okay,
Sorry, George.
we're going to start off December 13th, 1799. So we're getting real close to the 1800s.
Just a little bit ago.
67-year-old George Washington was 30 months into retirement.
Ugh.
He had lost track of time, and he was supervising his estate on a rainy afternoon. George realized he was late for dinner and rushed to the table, still in his wet clothes. Which, I hate wet clothes. I hate wet socks.
Dinner cannot be
Yeah.
that important to get to on time.
Yeah, I agree. So in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m., George had awoken with shortness of breath, a cough, and a runny nose. Now, just as an aside, I don't necessarily think the weather has to do with anything. You know how, like, moms are like, go put on your coat, you're going to catch a cold. I think
Yes.
it, like, lowers your immune system, but I don't think it's, like, the cause.
No, right.
They put that in there. I don't know. This was one of my
It's
sources.
just a fact.
Yes.
Take it or leave it.
His wife Martha and Colonel Tobias Lear, which I don't know, does the colonel live with him or is he friends? I don't know. They sent for Dr. James Craik and George Rollins. So James Craik is a doctor. George Rollins is a phlebotomist. I think that's the right title.
Interesting that they had
Phlebotomist?
specific,
Well,
such specific roles back then.
he specialized in bloodletting. So
Well, a little different, I guess. Than
I mean, is
today's
that right? But is that, wouldn't you consider that a phlebotomist to do with blood? Okay,
An
just cut
ist.
that whole thing out. Just everybody start over. Okay. So I'm going to tell you about the history of bloodletting a little bit, even though I don't know what they're called.
Oh no.
No, it's just real quick. But so bloodletting's been practiced for like 3,000 years at this point. Western medicine obviously has steered away from this, particularly like at the start of the 19th century. But it's still practiced in traditional Arabic and Chinese medicine. They mention like cupping, although cupping it doesn't necessarily have to draw blood, but I think it has to do with blood.
Yeah, the circulation, improving the circulation, I think.
So the idea, which I didn't know, was modeled off of menstrual bleeding, which was thought to kind of purge women of like bad humors, which I guess, I mean, yeah, if you think about it, it's like a kind of a renewal thing. Don't give me that look.
Can't get rid of my bad humor.
Nah. So medicine back then was largely based on the balancing of the humors of the body, which are different liquids, I guess you could say.
Oh.
So there's 4 humors. There's blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. And if you have an imbalance, they attributed it to a certain type of disease. So yellow bile, obviously we know what blood is. Yellow bile is the liquid made and released by the liver and then stored in the gallbladder. So like the gallbladder, I believe, regulates that. Like helps to break down like fatty foods. So if you don't have a gallbladder, like some people I know, digestion can be interesting.
Tricky.
Black bile was attributed to depression. Like an excess of black bile, which would be secreted by the spleen, they thought would cause like melancholy, which I don't even know. Like I kept looking up what black bile was, but all I got was it attributes to depression.
Yeah, I wonder what the equivalent would be, like what we know it as
today. I don't know. I didn't really go too deep into it. And then phlegm obviously is caused by infections, particularly in the respiratory system. So bloodletting was done by like lancets or leeches. You can still get like little lancets today, like little metal. Eric has a bunch. I don't know. We have lancets, like they're like little pokey things.
For what purpose?
I don't know. Lancing, like, I don't know.
He has a buildup of melancholy.
Right. Yeah, Eric of all people. So it was typical to remove between 1.5 to 2 liters of blood in a session. Today, bloodletting is still practiced in certain situations. So I'm hoping I can get these words right. To help polycythemia, which is too many red blood cells, they'll bloodlet. To help hemochromatosis. Oh, I sounded so smart there.
Then you ruined it.
I know, right? No, take that out. Hemochromatosis, which is a condition that causes iron binding proteins to accumulate in the tissues. So I don't know if that's like, you know how if some people work out too hard or if they work out too much, you can get like your muscle tissue can break down. I don't know if that's the same thing, but
yeah. And I wonder if diet has anything to do with that too. Because weirdly, iron binding levels were on a blood draw that I recently had.
Really?
Yeah. I thought they were low, but she was like, nah, your iron binding is actually great. So
it's helpful in certain levels, but
yeah.
People who know are like, shut up. And then in some instances, like plastic surgery recovery. So probably helping with like bruising or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Healing, clotting maybe. Because I think it's sort of like when you have calcium, but nothing, you take it in, but there's nothing to use
like
it.
absorb it.
Now you take in the iron and now you can actually use it. But if there's too much, interesting. I would definitely think that a low amount of that would be a concern.
Yeah.
But interesting that high is common enough that they were like, let's bleed them.
Yeah, I still feel like they use leeches in certain things here.
They do?
Yes, I do think that they use leeches in some situations, but they're like medical leeches. I don't think it's common. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about.
No, but that's interesting. Anyway.
Back to George.
Yes.
So, 6 a.m., George had developed a fever and his breathing was labored and his throat was raw. 7 a.m., Dr. Rollins removed 12 to 14 ounces of blood. Colonel Lear concocted a mixture of molasses, butter, and vinegar for George to swallow. Which, I mean, molasses, yeah, like you get like cough drops that are, something to help you. I don't know about the vinegar.
Well, it must coat the heck out of your throat.
Molasses. Yeah, with the butter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Craig decided that in order to better balance his humors, they would use blister of cantharides, or a toxin from a Spanish fly. So Contact with this toxin causes blisters on the skin. And if an animal eats them, it will cause blisters in the intestinal tract.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
there are actually a few species. I did not look into whether or not they were native here, but obviously we have them somewhere. Because he was in Virginia, so maybe the South. Yeah. So Dr. Craig was looking to create blisters in George's throat. And then because he believed it would like draw out the toxins if you created blisters.
Okie dokie.
So I believe they had him swallow this toxin.
What?
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive to me, but all right.
Yes. $17.99.
I know.
By 9:30, Dr. Rollins had moved another 18 ounces of blood, and then again at 11 a.m. Noontime, George would be given an enema.
Oh my god, this poor guy.
I'm sorry.
What the hell? Did you see? Oh my god. Dracula Dead and Loving It?
No.
And there's a mental asylum, and the main doctor just keeps prescribing enemas to everybody. Sorry. He's like, oh yeah, put him in a straitjacket, and then give him an enema.
Oh, we gotta watch that too.
Oh, it's so good. I can't believe you've not seen it.
No.
Good. Anyway.
All right. After George's enema, they would make him gargle sage tea in vinegar. Sage is actually a good call. I mean, of all the things. Although the vinegar, stop with the vinegar.
That must be so
after
acidic and
after
burning.
the blisters in his throat. Yeah.
My throat's not sore anymore. It's
on fire.
Yeah.
He would also have difficulty breathing while laying flat. Epiglottitis. Do you know what that is?
Something with the epiglottis.
Yes. So the epiglottis is that little cartilage.
The flap.
The flap. The
Yes.
cartridge. The cartridge. The cartilage flap.
When you say it went down the wrong tube.
Yes.
Yes.
It can swell,
Ugh.
causing issues with your breathing, obviously. More common in children, but can happen with anybody. It's basically like a throat infection. Today we would use antibiotics. This is probably why George had trouble breathing while he was like laying down. More bloodletting.
Ugh.
32 ounces this time. And another doctor showed up. Dr. Elisha Cullen Dick. That is his actual name. Maybe it's Elisha.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Thought this wasn't a good idea. More doctors came in. Dr. Gustavus Richard Brown, much easier name, elected to give George calomel and tartar emetic to make him vomit. Calomel is basically mercury chloride in a mineral form.
Great.
And tartar emetic, E-M-E-T-I-C.
Yeah. I would say emetic.
Yeah. Mimics arsenic. So, poison, basically.
Mercury and arsenic.
To make him puke. He's had an enema. He swallowed a toxin.
Do they think he has ingested something that now is making him sick?
They think they're trying to balance the humors.
Right.
So they think that he either has too much or not enough of something.
Oh my god. So just
to make him
throwing
sick.
everything at him.
Right. 5 p.m.
Ugh.
George and Martha go over his will, and he continues to struggle to breathe. He told Dr. Craig, "Doctor, I die hard, but I'm not afraid to go." Which is like, yeah, you're not afraid to go because this is hell.
Yeah, right, yeah.
This man's been through so many battles. Like, this is the worst.
That's what I was going to say, like, for this to be your end is just...
And poor Martha, she's like, I mean, they're doctors. How are you going to question them?
Right.
8 p.m. More blisters of cantharides. Cantharides.
Cantharides.
Anyway, 8 p.m. They give him more of that toxic stuff that makes more blisters. But this time they put it on his feet, arms, and legs. And then they, like, put a wheat poultice around his throat. I don't know if that is, like, a way to draw out.
Yeah.
That's probably, like, the least... You probably just could have done that.
We could have started there, maybe.
Right.
Less invasive.
So George at one point tells the doctor, I'm just going... Have me decently buried. Do not let my body be put in the vault in less than 3 days after I'm dead. Which is because people used to get buried alive. There wasn't an efficient way to check, like, if somebody had a pulse or, I don't think they knew too much about, like, comas or stuff like that. So he knew enough to be like, please just wait. 10 p.m. George dies of acute epiglottitis. And Dr. Craig says that it was inflammatory quinsy, which is basically like a throat infection, which he wasn't super wrong. Right. And Dr. Dick thought it was stridulary suffocatus, something. It's a throat blockage, basically, which is basically the same. He had a throat infection. It blocked his airway. You couldn't get rid of it.
Jeez.
By the time George died, he had been drained of 80 ounces of blood in a 12-hour period, which is about 40% of the body's blood.
Jeez.
So then, one guy showed up a little bit late. Dr. William Thornton. He specialized in tracheotomies, which were sometimes effective.
Oh, yeah.
However, Dr. Thornton was like, well, guys, we could freeze his body and then, like, thaw it out over several days using, like, cold water, blankets, stuff like that. And then we could, like, inflate his lungs and transfuse his blood with, like, lamb's blood. And then we could maybe revive him.
So,
and people were like, Bill, no.
We're so bummed.
Thanks for the suggestion. No. George is today buried at Mount Vernon on his former estate. I didn't know that you could actually visit his actual estate. I mean, you must, obviously.
Yeah.
It must be like a huge tourist attraction. Yeah, that's the death of George Washington.
The hell?
I'm so sorry for all of the laugh breaks and also that I can barely read, apparently.
Well, you know what? The pronunciations, I don't think I've ever heard those words since. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like we still use them today.
No. Yeah.
But you think about it, and you're like, I mean, obviously we know that things that killed people in the 1700s, 1800s, don't still kill people now. But you're like, oh, you're doing everything wrong.
But think about, okay, today, right? We have to, like, open people up sometimes.
Yes.
And probably in the future, they're going to find a way where we don't have to open anybody up at all. We can do it however they're going to do it. So if you go, yeah, they used to cut people open and stitch them up, and they'd be like, that's crazy, and people would die, and they'd bleed out, and, like, yeah, some of the medical things that we go through now they seem barbaric. But.
I mean, even laparoscopic surgery now is from, like, maybe 15, 20 years ago.
Really?
Is different. Huh. Well, I think, the surgery, Joe had a surgery that was open.
Yeah.
That now is done laparoscopically in, like,
really?
The early 2000s.
Huh.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's true. And robots do surgery.
Well, and that's
days.
the thing, too. Like, we have actual cameras that we can put in there. Because, if you're not, laparoscopic is like, you have a device to see. Yes. Whereas, before you would have to, and depending on what it is, you might not be able to do it that way. But, like, the healing time is so much smaller. And, yeah.
And to clarify, because I'm not an idiot, I know people are controlling the robots. They're not robots just doing surgery.
I did not pick up on that. Yes. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe in the future.
Well, Jesus.
That's very scary.
That's terrifying. But yeah, I mean, oh, you're like, wish
Poor
you just had
George.
like a lozenge.
I know, you think about, like, it makes me think of the Hamilton, when George Washington, he's
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm leaving, and he's like, I want to sit under my own vine, and you're like, yeah, this is going to be really rough for you in the next, like, year, George.
67 though, at that time. I
Been
guess.
through war.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
bad.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you ready for the next
I am.
story? Henry Rathbone. Do you know him?
No.
Sounds familiar, though, right?
Yes.
We're going to skip ahead to the Civil War. Again, doesn't have to do with independence, but, American history.
Yeah.
Henry was born July 1st, 1837. He was the son of New York's first mayor, Jared Rathbone. Jared died in 1845, so Henry's mom remarried to Ira Harris, who would become a U.S. Senator of New York. So basically, he came from an affluent family. They married into another one. Ira had 4 children, including Clara Harris, who weirdly would grow up to be engaged to Henry. So it's not like incest, but it's incest adjacent. Although I think it was probably common back then.
Yeah, I guess so.
So over time, they would be engaged, but they wouldn't be able to get married because Henry would be enlisted in the U.S. Civil War on the Union side. He would later be appointed by President Lincoln in 1865 to Assistant Adjutant General of Volunteers, which...
They were so wordy back in those days.
But it's still a thing. It's basically like the HR, like, of the army. I'm not kidding.
Yes.
Like, because I looked it up and I was like, what is it? It's a desk job, basically.
Okay.
But it's still like he had served as captain at one point. I think he got promoted to like major. Anyway, he was starting to kind of climb the political ladder a little bit.
Okay.
Not the political, but government
Military.
ladder.
Yeah. He was going places.
April 14th, 1865.
Okay.
Does that date mean anything to you?
Does President Lincoln get shot that
He
day?
does get shot
Okay.
that day.
Oh, thank God.
That was really good because I wouldn't have known that. President Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln were invited to the play Our American Cousin. Lincoln didn't want to go.
Son of a bitch.
It's like one of those work things where you're like, do I have to? But it was like a Friday night, and they're like, the president's coming to see our play. And he's like, great, yeah, I'll be there. Fantastic. So he invites first General Ulysses S. Grant, who was the guy for the Union Army in the Civil War. I mean, because it's like he led the Union Army.
Yes. No, yeah, everybody.
But there was a lot of, like, I don't know. Anyway. They said no. Because his wife didn't like Mary Todd. I don't know. Yeah. Not a fan.
Goodness.
But I don't think they weren't like, my wife hates your wife, so we're not coming. And they made up some sort of excuse. Lincoln's next pick was Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. But Edwin was like, the war was like all but won, but there was still some things he had to complete. He then called on Thomas Eckert, chief of the military telegraph office. But Edwin was like, no, he can't go either. Which I don't even, like, what? Like, what is there to do on a Friday night?
In 1865.
Yeah.
Also, the president is called.
But the president didn't even want to go. I think it was just like, yeah, we'll totally be there. And then we're like, oh, fuck, we gotta go.
No, we gotta go. We committed to that thing a week ago.
So they finally settle on Henry Rathbone and his fiancée, Clara Harris. His fiancée / stepsister, Clara Harris. And they were like...
right? Not half?
Yeah. Yeah, because Ira had already had kids with his wife. His wife must have passed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was afraid that... Okay.
Yes. He brought the 4 children into the marriage. And then I think it was Henry and, like, his brother, maybe.
Much more acceptable then. I mean, still
It's still weird, but yeah. So a carriage brought Henry and Clara to the theater. They obviously sat on the balcony. You've seen the drawings. it was Henry on the sofa, and then Clara in between, and then Mary on the other side of the sofa, and then Lincoln was sitting at the other end on like a rocking chair. During Act 3 of the play, Lincoln's bodyguard had stepped away from the entrance, so I believe there was like a door to the balcony. Some sources say he stepped away for like a drink. I don't know if that was just like, you asshole.
Yeah, alcoholic.
And then, of course, John Wilkes Booth slipped in. During a laugh break, John shot Lincoln in the head. The audience at first thought like it was part of the play, and then they realized there was like gun smoke or whatever smoke coming from the balcony. And they looked up to see like a scuffle. So Henry acted fast. He grabbed John and the two men wrestled, and John's gun got like knocked away. So John pulled out a dagger and went to go stab Henry in the chest, but Henry blocked it with his forearm, but it got him like pretty deep. Ugh. Like nicking an artery, which I didn't know there were like arteries in your arm. Like an artery to me is like a big... Anyway, whatever it was like not good.
It was bad news.
Yeah. So then John goes to like jump on the stage. Henry he tries to like get him. He only grabs his coat. John famously breaks his leg on the stage.
Yes. I do remember that.
Which I think is what kind of led to his... Didn't he have to like hide out in like a barn at the end?
So, did we learn that from Drunk History?
I think I just learned it from history class.
I learned things from Drunk History.
So Henry's like, okay, stop that man. Obviously, he doesn't get caught until later. John Wilkes Booth had wedged a board like on the inside of the balcony, so like the entrance, so basically that nobody could get in and stop him in time. But Henry was like wounded.
Yeah.
So he's like trying to get this board unwedged with like a wounded arm. He's like severely bleeding. Finally, he gets it unwedged. A doctor bursts in. And Henry's like, I'm like hurt pretty bad. And the doctor looks at Henry and he said he looked him in the eyes and was like, you're fine. And like went to the president. Obviously the president had died instantly, I imagine. And, Clara, I think in one of her letters later was like, he didn't really bleed from his head. It was more like internally.
Because it probably didn't exit.
Yeah. The president was slumped over in his chair. Henry would eventually pass out from his blood loss. And then when he came to, they would have already taken Lincoln's body over to, I think, like a neighboring building. And then he and Clara assisted Mary Todd over there as well. So Mary would see the blood on Clara's dress, and she was like, oh, my husband's blood, but it actually had been Henry's. So Clara would keep the bloody dress in one of their summer homes in Albany. Like, I don't know why, but she kept it in a closet, but she said that she saw Lincoln's ghost and got freaked out and like walled up the closet with the dress in it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So fast forward, Henry and Clara would get married on July 11th, 1867. They would go on to have 3 kids, but their marriage and their family life was pretty plagued by Henry's like survivor's guilt, I think.
Yeah.
He developed depression after the incident, which was made worse by certain men in the press like General Grant, who was like, hey, if I had been there, I would have been able to stop it.
Well, if your wife wasn't such a bitch.
I know. And one of Lincoln's bodyguards, I don't know if it was the bodyguard that was... If it was the bodyguard that was there, motherfucker, like, you stepped away. But, people... I mean, it's kind of like the people that talk about 9/11. Like, if I was on that plane, I would have been,
It's they talk about everything.
I would have been able to stop. Like, shut up.
Jesus.
God. So in 1881, President James Garfield was also assassinated, which was basically like a huge trigger for his guilt.
PTSD.
Yeah, pretty much. So
that's gotta be so... That does have to be so traumatic.
Yeah. So the following president, Chester Arthur, was also a family friend of Henry and Clara's. And he was like, listen, I think you should get away. I think let's make you the U.S. ambassador of Germany. And you can just go there, have your whole family life, get away from, like, I mean, it's got to be easier to ignore the news from at that time.
Well, right. Who would even know who you were over there?
So they moved to Germany. He continues to suffer from depression, stomach ulcers, survivor's guilt, that sort of thing. He also grew suspicious of Clara, his wife. So he thought she was being unfaithful. He thought she wanted a divorce. He thought she was going to, like, take the kids. Which at that time, I'm like, okay, yes, she does come from money. It would probably be easier for her. But and maybe at some points she may have not wanted to be married. I mean, it's hard. Like, it's not for the faint of heart to help somebody, I think, through their guilt or their PTSD or whatever it is.
Especially because they have no idea what to even do with it.
Yeah, there's nothing. Right. We're a little bit more equipped now to at least.
Right.
So Clara's sister Louise would also come to Germany. She would help kind of take care of the kids. One night on December 23rd, 1883, Henry thought someone had broken into their house. And he was, like, basically suffering from, like, a break. He thought somebody came to kidnap the kids. Clara was like, okay, Louise, take the kids into their room, shut the door. So she did. Henry followed Clara into their room and shot her 3 times in the chest. One bullet would go through one side and out of her backbone. And then he also stabbed her in the heart before stabbing himself. So Louise, obviously, was the first one on the scene. She alerted the police. Henry survived his attempted suicide. And he was taken to live out the rest of his days in an insane asylum. Clara's brother, William, would come to Germany and take the kids and basically raise them from then on. Henry would die in 1911, basically in an insane asylum. And Henry's son, Henry Jr., would grow up to be a congressman in New York. And in 1910, he would have his mother's bloody dress burned because he thought it was like a curse on their family. So,
yeah,
that is the quick story of Henry Rathbone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. According to Louise, Henry claimed to have heard an intruder.
Not according to Louise, according to Henry. Because when they came to get him,
yes,
he was like, I thought somebody was in the... And he might have. I mean, all of the sources were like, he suffered some sort of break. Like, it was coming for a long time, but... Yeah, he was clearly... I don't know if he was just like, no, that's totally what happened, or if he really thought someone was there.
Like, right, if he mistook her, or if, like, what...
It seemed... I don't know that the details weren't... I mean, it was a long time ago. Yeah. But I got the impression that she was like, let's go argue in our bedroom. And I don't know if he was, like, so rageful that he shot her. And who knows? We don't know, like, if this guy had any sort of mental illness other than, survivor's guilt, depression, that sort of thing. I don't know. Did he hallucinate? Was he just so mad? I mean, he also tried to kill himself, so...
Well, and I could see that if he was like, oh, I mistook her for an intruder, killed her, and then realized what I had done and tried to kill myself.
Maybe. Yeah.
Or was like, I know she's cheating on me. I'm just gonna lie and say all this stuff. It did seem like it's so.
Clara was like... Because I think it wasn't the first time that he was like, you're cheating on me, or you're going to leave me and take the kids and whatever. And I think she was just kind of like, oh my God, enough. Like, I'm not. But, yeah.
That's got to be so exhausting.
That's so weird, though, right? Like, if you picture any kind of, like, artist rendition of, the assassination of Lincoln, like, that whole thing changed all those people's lives.
Yeah.
Forever.
very, very, very directly. That's, oh my, imagine if he hadn't had the dress burned. Someone like bought the house and was like, I'm going to do some renovation.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Oof.
That's got to be on whatever the house is. It's got to be on the historical registry. You can't just like go in and do stuff.
I mean, a summer house in Albany.
That'd be nice. A summer house in Albany.
It's a city.
A summer house at all.
I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Those
Weird.
are my interesting, weird American history topics. Happy 4th of July.
You know what? It is so strange how time really softens things. Because you're like, yeah, Lincoln got shot in the head. And when you think about it, you're just like, that's just the thing that happened.
We grew up with that story.
Right.
Like,
but then when you think about it, you re-look at it from the standpoint of somebody who's there, felt he had a responsibility to try to help.
yeah. Yeah, being like from the military, you're the man. So, of course, like,
Right,
no
the
one would
women
expect
weren't
that
gonna-
Clara or Mary would help. But, yeah. And think about poor freaking Clara. Like, she's there witnessing, like, someone get shot. And then her husband, I mean, he could have died if they didn't attend to his arm.
They could have been like, we're just trying to balance his humor. And we should let it happen.
Oh my God. Yeah, a lot of blood in this one. I didn't realize.
I'd kind of rather that than like, we're getting a lot of excessive black bile.
I don't know. Maybe one of us should do like a deep dive in balancing the humors, because there's got to be so many weird instances of just, like, okay, so like, yeah, bloodletting. There's a million ways you could do that, but like, okay, if you had like an excess of like yellow bile, what are you supposed to do? Like,
Number one, how do we know what's excessive? What have you determined? How are you managing to
how do you
measure
see
it?
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I think certain diseases would indicate to them that you have an excess of. I don't know how they would handle that. I did not deep dive into that.
I mean, I would assume that they had learned that post-mortem
Yeah.
for most of the stuff. Which is like...
But then where's the black bile? Is it just the blood in your spleen? And they just said, like... she was so sad all the time. She had too much black bile.
We really gotta get rid of that black bile. I'm having a high black bile day.
I'm gonna text you that. Kim. I can't.
I was having one of those the other day.
Can you imagine if you called into work? Like, I'm so sorry.
My humor is imbalanced.
This one was interesting, though. I don't know. It just, poor freaking George. Poor Lincoln. Maybe it's not so bad being around in the 2020s.
I don't know. I feel like it just... one thing gets traded for another.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what? Being alive in the Civil War,
Oh,
that had to have been so terrifying.
We're going to talk about things in my next topic that, like, you never thought about before. I don't think. I never thought about before. That
Okay.
go, like, living in old times must have been so uncomfortable.
Think about, like, just deodorant.
Yeah, just a generally
Or
uncomfortable...
there's no, like, running water. I have to be in a
You're
bath.
sponging yourself.
Gross.
And not even all the time. Not regularly.
When were antibiotics discovered? Penicillin, right?
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
Accidentally. Who would have thought to be like, this rotten orange, though? Eat it. Let's find out what
Put it
happened.
in your mouth. And the person would have had something. Right?
Sorry, put it in your mouth. This episode. Oh, boy.
Well, that was definitely weird. Things I
Yeah.
did not know. So, I appreciate you. All right, guys.
Bye.
Happy weekend of independence to our country.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relativelyweirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week.